I think that it's going to happen. How soon it happens, what it looks like, I don't know, but I do know that, remember here, it will make Alabama and Ohio State more money. Are they going to say no to that? No. What is up, everybody? It is Jake with Master Football back at it again. Happy Thursday. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to be updated on everything college football, pro football, Madden, EA college football, NFL draft, anything related to American football, hit that red subscribe button. You will not be disappointed. Also, hit the like button too, and follow on Twitter/X. That fam is growing. Without further ado, let's get into the video. I was talking with my boy Bronco Blameyer, and for any of you who don't know who he is, he does fantastic work about Boise State. My boys, Boise State. But anyways, we talked with him, and we were going back and forth on ideas for channels and here and there. And the cool thing is with YouTube, you can have a really cool symbiotic relationship with a lot of the different people out there. Again, my content, his content, you can consume both of ours in a day. We are not competing with each other. But he had a really good point that has made me think, kind of not repositioning my channel, but refocusing my channel on certain things. One of the things he said was, he was like, one of the issues with talking about conference realignment in terms of college football is that eventually that's all your channel is. Yeah, you get the pop. Yeah, you got to do it because obviously there's so many people that like to pay attention to it. There's so much interest out there. But you kind of fall into a trap where it's like, oh, do I have to talk about this again? Do I have to talk about this again? And so on. I mean, if you look at my channel, I made a couple of those videos before, but once the season started, I wanted to talk about football right then and there. You had the story recently about how Cal, Stanford, and SMU went over to the ACC. I didn't even have a report on that just because I'm like, this is just so stupid to talk about. That being said, I want to talk about conference realignment one more time. We're going to talk about some football later on, don't you worry. But for this video, we are going to talk about it again. I know I'm just breaking what I literally just said. But anyways, first thing we're going to do is start off with an axiom. So Jeffrey Miller on Twitter, he's one of my favorite psychology professors out of the University of New Mexico. I believe it's New Mexico somewhere. But he's extremely, he's one of the foremost experts on evolutionary psychology and kind of the mating mind. He's absolutely positively one of the best minds out there. And he said this, and this is not a controversial or, breathtaking thing that he said, but it is true, where he says that culture is downstream of biology. Now, that is a very professional way of saying what this next person said. This is the only person I could find saying it because I've heard multiple academics say this, but I wasn't able to find the literal receipt of them saying it. But this next tweet is in essence what this tweet means, just in a little bit more plain language. Culture is downstream from what hot girls want, such is life. Now, I know you're asking yourself, what the hell does that have to do with conference realignment? Well, there is a article that came out recently that we have to go through. We also have a presentation on the article to kind of talk about the hot girls and what they want going forward, because I'm telling you, this could potentially be one of the most tectonic plate shifting moments in college football. And again, let's get into that article right now from Front Office Sports. So Front Office Sports, right here, this article from Amanda Kristovich, she says, the first official proposal for promotion relegation in college football, says in the wake of Power 5 conference realignment, one group of 5 official proposed a 3-tiered alliance of 24 FBS football teams. Teams will be promoted or relegated at the end of each season and earn extra revenue for their schools. So this is a thing that a lot of people have been kind of hinting at for a long time here. Eventually, we're going to get to why this pertains to the hot girls, so to say. Let's continue on through the article. It says here that the latest round of conference realignment has left group of 5 schools, quote, and Pac-12 leftover schools, Oregon State and Washington State, wondering how to remain competitive and maintain conference stability. They're considering an idea most commonly used in sports across the pond, promotion and relegation. Boise State Associate Athletic Director Michael Walsh, I can't believe my boy was the one that came up with this, has created what is believed to be the first formal proposals on the subject. He has written an in-depth plan for a 3-tiered alliance of 24 FBS football teams in the Pacific, Mountain, and Central time zones, with the opportunity for promotion and relegation at the end of each season. The 22-slide PowerPoint obtained and reviewed by Front Office Sports, I wasn't able to find a copy of it, anyways, has been shared with athletic directors in and outside of the conference, as well as with Mountain West Commissioner Gloria Nevarez. Quote, many folks are kicking around the concepts of relegation/promotion or mega leagues, Nevarez told FOS, but, quote, this is probably the first I've seen of somebody really putting pen to paper and looking at it comprehensively. Again, at this point, most of the people who've talked about this are online media personalities. I suppose I'm an online media personality, but we've kind of been, hypothetically looking at this. But Michael Walsh, associate AD at Boise State, kind of sees the writing on the wall here. And again, he mentions that later on here where he's kind of like, we got to start thinking differently. Let's continue on through the article. It says Walsh's goal to create a lucrative football package while allowing Olympic sports to avoid the coast-to-coast travel now required in Power 4 leagues. As you know, Washington and Oregon joined the Big Ten. That's all sports, meaning that the softball team's got to go fly to Rutgers, the volleyball team's got to go fly to Nebraska, and so on and so forth. Their closest opponents that's not on the West Coast are 1,500 plus miles away. This is trying to avoid that by having kind of a separation of football and the rest of those conferences. Continuing on here. The proposal begins by telling athletics officials to, quote, control what you can control, unquote. In reference to the power conferences, it asks, do you want to be at the kids' table under the same roof or eating at a different establishment, end quote. Much like in European soccer leagues, teams will be promoted or relegated at the end of every season based on performance. For example, the worst placed team in Tier 1 would be relegated to Tier 2, and the conference champion of Tier 2 would take its place. Wall suggests that the Mountain West and Pac-12, as well as regional teams from the AAC, Conference USA, or WAC, could participate. All of those sports, including men's basketball, will remain in their current conferences in order to maximize the opportunity for NCAA postseason automatic qualifiers. As you know, there's a certain amount of automatic qualifiers for the NCAA tournament and this and that. They are seeded appropriately. Again, if you win the Missouri Valley Conference, you're not going to be a number one seed, even if you go 30-0. If you beat the requisite teams, you are. But again, it's still seeded according to kind of how strong you are. College basketball is much more, thorough about this as opposed to college football. Continuing, it says the first football tier could be the fifth power conference, though Walsh noted that the decision would ultimately lie with the College Football Playoff and NCAA, who award the designation for voting power and revenue distribution. The proposal suggests modest bonuses based on a base sum for each tier, performance bonuses, and a specific bonus for tier status. The amount of this revenue, however, would depend on the media contract, while suggested the alliance target NBC, Peacock, Apple, and Amazon as partners, given they've all shown an interest in football, but have much less inventory than Fox, ESPN, and CBS. It's unclear how much traction this proposal will receive, though the Mountain West now has plenty of time to consider more creative ideas. Oregon State and Washington State will likely not make any decisions about conference realignment until their lawsuit against the conference is resolved, which could take months. Meanwhile, the Mountain West has begun considering more traditional scenarios. It has courted Oregon State and Washington State and explored taking the Pac-12's name and intellectual property, as Front Office Sports previously reported. Quote here, it's the right time to think differently and consider what the next generation will wish we had done rather than putting a Band-Aid on yesterday's problem, Walsh said. So I created a quick PowerPoint here to kind of break down what's going on here. So the breakdown of conference realignment. So what we have to do is go over the rules. Like I said before, the axiom of the hot girls kind of deciding what the culture is. It's downstream from what they want. Let's continue on with that. So old world college football, the way that worked is conferences were regional, and most conferences had a few dominant hub teams. As you know, the Pac-12 West Coast, Big 8/12 was in Texas to Nebraska, kind of that center part of the country. Big 10 Great Lakes region, ACC, East Coast, and SEC was the deep South. And you saw the fact that USC in the Pac-12, Texas and OU Big 12, Michigan, Ohio State Big 10, ACC had Florida State and Miami and Clemson, and SEC has Alabama and Georgia. And then those could change here and there, but for the most part, there's a certain amount of power brands in those leagues. Also, rivalries were extremely important, even if they are lopsided. Again, clean old-fashioned hate between Georgia and Georgia Tech. We know that Georgia wins that more than often than not. And then all the rivalry between Texas and Texas Tech and so on. You know the fact that even if they understand that it's a lopsided rivalry, they'll still play at West Virginia versus Marshall, something like that. What we're going into right now is the new world of college football and what we've seen so far through conference realignment. So we've seen more established leagues will pluck the hub teams from less established leagues. Hub teams need to be good enough educationally, need to be invited. So as an example, when the Big Ten wants to take from the Pac-12, they don't take Colorado or Utah, who are closer geographically. They take the best team. They take USC and UCLA. Same thing with the SEC taking from the Big 12. They wanted to take the hub teams, who are the most important. They take the big ones from there. Same thing with there. The Big 12 takes the hub teams from the American, UCF and Cincinnati and Houston. And then the American takes some hub teams from Conference USA and so on. That's kind of how it flows there. Also, we know this too from conference realignment. History and tradition mean almost Nothing. Like we said, UCLA is going with USC, but that's more of a just a ease of flying in and out of LA. I mean, UCLA matters, but they're not as important. I would argue that Washington is probably more sought after from the Big Ten than UCLA if it wasn't for USC. Entering this new world of college football, like I said before, my axiom about the hot girls. So if we're going through this situation right now, what do the hot girls want? In this instance, who are the hot girls? Are the hot girls the TV partners, or are the hot girls the top flight universities in the country? I would argue that's kind of a symbiotic relationship between both. I would argue both. What they want is more money and somewhat educational mission alignment. Like we said before, what do the hot girls want? The whole reason behind this conference realignment is what do the hot girls want? They want better matchups. They want more money. That's how and again, those two things go together with each other. So college football has much more bad weeks than the NFL does, just because, there's certain times that, especially SEC crap week, or let's just say that week Alabama plays Arkansas and they're favored by 3 touchdowns, whatever it is. College football there's more fat in conferences than I think people would like to admit. Again, because of historical, history, what's going on with like certain teams. Like I said, Vanderbilt, people just kind of accept they're not good at football and so on. That being said, the TV partners have said, what if we were to add better teams into those leagues? What if we were to do something like that? Increase the likelihood that we get a Texas at Georgia, we get an Oklahoma versus LSU, so on and so forth. That's what you continue on here. Like I said, the hot girls want it. It's happening more. I also mentioned educational mission alignment. However, it says right here, other than CU back to the Big 12, almost all conference realignment involved moving a team from a lower level educational conference to a higher one. Again, it's not as relevant if we talk about a football separation only occurs. That was mentioned in that article there. Also here, what do the hot girls not care about? Rivalries and tradition, like we said, the border war between Kansas and Missouri, Battle of the Brazos, Texas A&M versus Baylor, Battle for the Iron Skill after 2025, TCU versus SMU, that's going away, Backyard Brawl, until recently, that almost went away though, Texas versus Texas A&M, although until they were forced to be in the same conference as each other. Like we said, hot girls, they're kind of important, but they're not as important. Push those to the side. If it means more money, we'll figure that out. Also, they don't care about regionality. As you see with conference realignment, Stanford and Cal in the ACC, USC and UCLA in the Big Ten with Oregon and Washington, West Virginia in the Big 12 until the league actually filled that in. But again, we see the fact that regionality, history, rivalries, secondary, third, tertiary to money. So going through that, I'm not going to go through the specifics of what I think this is going to happen here with, the SEC, Big Ten, ACC, and so on. And so I'm not going to do that. But I am going to go through the positives and the negatives because a lot of people have talked about this. And it's pretty true here that there's a lot of negatives. But again, the positives, I think, outweigh it because of one word. Going through the minuses here, you can see what are the minuses of promotion and relegation. Would require a ton of work decoupling football from the current leagues. It would drastically cut at the tradition of the conferences. It would highly upset the middle and bottom level teams in the leagues, SEC, Big Ten, and so on. Would introduce some uncertainty into athletic budget departments and would also increase scheduling pressure. You would no longer, again, you see the fact that they're like, no more scheduling games 20 years down the road. Oh yeah, we're going to play these guys in 2038. It's like you're going to have to schedule a little bit faster than that. But you take those away and you put in the pluses. What are the pluses? Remember what we talked about. What do the hot girls want? The hot girls would make more money. You take away Alabama versus Mississippi State and you added Alabama versus USC. You take away Ohio State versus Indiana and you add Ohio State versus Georgia as a regular season game. More of those would increase the amount of money you get at the top level. No, again, people always, oh, no, it would never happen. Trust me here. What do the hot girls want? Why are we going through conference realignment? The entire reason why is because the hot girls want more money. How do you do that? You create a promotion relegation system in order to promote teams doing the most for their football program. Like we said, doing the most for their football program. Another point here is that trying to be good at football would be rewarded rather than let it slide. There are certain teams, we're not going to mention who have kind of been meandering in their conferences for a while. Meanwhile, taking all the cheddar cheese that the top level teams have been, how do we say this, kind of giving to them. But going forward, I'm telling you right now, if you have a promotion and relegation schedule, you can't sit around and rest on your laurels and just expect to get the same fat check. You have to try to be good at football. Iron sharpens iron. It would be good for the sport. What do I think is going to be the future of college football? Here's what I think is going to happen. There's what I think is going to happen, and what should happen with that. Two things are going to happen. Again, an EPL style promotion and relegation system will occur. It's just going to happen. A lot of people, oh no, there's no way. The EPL is trying to get rid of it. No, what they're going to actually happen here is the EPL style, EPL, Europe, English Premier League, will have that promotion and relegation. What they'll do there is they'll make sure they always have top flight matchups. They're tired of dead weeks in college football. More top flight matchups will increase the amount of interest in the sport. Also, a separation of football from other sports that's going to happen. We're already kind of seeing it. And again, we see this in a lot of people say, oh, it's not going to happen. We already see Notre Dame do it. Notre Dame's independent in football, in the ACC, in all other sports, and so on. We see the fact that, Navy does the same thing with the Patriot League for all other sports, and they're in the American for football. We see the fact that, Hawaii is not in the Mountain West for Olympic sports, but they are for football. That happens more often than you think. A separation of football will occur. Whether or not it's compliant with Title IX, they will address that down the road. That will be coming down the road. Now, what also should happen here, because there's a couple of things that you need to make this an easier transition than normal. A couple of those things. A path for a relegated team to the championship. So as an example, if you're in the top tier, however they decide to make that, let's say it's 18 teams, and your schedule is, let's just say you have to play a 9-game conference schedule and 7 of the teams are ranked and you go 3-5 and you get relegated or something like, I don't know what the situation is, something like that. You should still have an opportunity to go to the national championship. But I think it will be like basketball, where you'll be, instead of that top tier, you'll be in the second tier. And you might not have as many top flight matchups, but you'll still have the opportunity to get seeded in the 12 and more than likely 16-team playoff eventually down the road. That way it isn't just the haves and the have-nots. You'll have a whole entire league for people who have an opportunity to get in there, but it will be seeded more similar to a college basketball seeding situation. We also see here that, like I said, the path for a relegated team to the championship. EPL currently doesn't have a championship. They just do a round-robin tournament and have a point system to award the champion. So a playoff would need to include those teams to take the last place, in a tougher league. Like I said, if you take last place in a really tough league and you get relegated, the next season you still might be a really good team, but you should still have an opportunity. Like we said here, the playoff seeding would look a lot like basketball. A 27-3 team for the Patriot League would be a 13 seed, while a 15-15 team, Big Ten team, would be a 10 seed. Again, you see the fact that worse record, but they understand there's a little bit more nuance to that record. We also need to have, what I think should happen here, is some guarantee / agreement of rivalries. What I mean by that is, if you look at the concept behind the 24-team model, it's 8, 8, and 8. What it would be is it would be 7 in conference, in your division, so to say, and then it would be 3 entire 24-team league. So between the other 16 teams, you have 3 of those games, maybe 3 reserve rivalries if they're not in your division or whatever. And then you'd have 2 games outside. So as an example, for Washington and State and Oregon State, it would be Washington and Oregon. So you'd have 2 out of your whole kind of alliance. You'd have 7 in your division and 3 within the other 2 things there. It would be a really cool idea there. Also with this, another thing that should happen is as much revenue certainty as can be found. One thing that sucks here is, unfortunately, let's just say you're a tier 1 team and you build your budget for tier 1, tier 1, tier 1, tier 1, and then you go down to tier 2, and let's just say it's a 50% pay cut. You have to take a 50% pay cut on the revenue driving sport in your university, which is football. But what if you're to do like a certain number of year look back, and they use that to calculate the current payout? What I mean by that is, let's just say you have a 5-year look back, and you get, you're in tier 1, tier 2, you get relegated, you go back up tier 1, and then tier 1, you have 20% tier 1, 20% tier 1, 20% tier 2, 20% tier 1, and 20% tier 1, as opposed to just going straight down to a tier 2 rate for that whole year. Again, it would be a 5-year look back to kind of see how you've done, and then going forward, that's what it would be. So there would be less variation in what you've done, more so, just give you some consistency with your budget. And as much as you might say, oh, you're crazy, it will never happen. Think about this. Bob Thompson right here. This person says, never going to happen. No one will sign up for possible relegation. And he says, Bob Thompson, former president of Fox Sports and the founder of the Big Ten Network, so aka Smarter Than You on Conference Realignment, he says, I thought the same thing initially. But if it's somehow structured where the upside is significant and the downside is not a whole lot different than what you make now, there might be something to it. Just depends on the spreads from level to level. Like I said, there's ways that you can alleviate that. But remember here, what do the hot girls want? They want more money. This is how you do it. As much as you might think, oh no, there's no way they're going to do something like this. Remember here, we already went off the axiom. Culture is downstream from what hot girls want. College football is downstream from what the hot girls want. What the hot girls want is the big networks, those hot girls. They want better matchups. And the universities, they want more money. How do you do that? You create incentives to where people have to be as good as possible in sports. Again, you make sure that you align certain things like that with education and so on. But if you decouple football from the rest of the Olympic sports and you treat it as its own entity, I don't see why you couldn't do this. Again, it wouldn't be that bad. There's no reason why Washington, they're, softball team should go all the way to Rutgers. You do something like this, it is coming. Whether or not it comes sooner rather than later, I don't know, but we're already talking about it. If it works for the Mountain West and it can work for Alabama and Ohio State to make more money, they will do it. All right, guys, get in the comments right now. What do you think about that? I personally love it. I made videos about it before. I just want to talk about that like I said before. I think that it's going to happen. How soon it happens, what it looks like, I don't know. But I do know that, remember here, it will make Alabama and Ohio State more money. Are they going to say no to that? No. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you so much for being here. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Do all that stuff. I really appreciate it. So for me, guys, I'll see you guys later. I am out.